Hi, guys. I want to welcome you all to SheNelledIt Podcast. My name is Natalia. I'm just so excited to have you guys watching us today. This is our first podcast. We do have our first guest, which is Pastor Gene Howard from Purpose Driven Church.
What's
He
up?
is the co founder, the founder, everything when it comes to the church. This is his God given gift. And so we are just so excited to have him on board to be our first guest. But first, I just want to talk to you guys about what She Know the podcast is about. It is about mental health awareness. It's about bringing it to the forefront of the world. It is about spirituality, how it coincides, how you can navigate through life, how it coincides with everything that you're dealing with in life when it comes to school, work, children, whatever the case may be. This podcast is going to be your answer, your prayers, or whatever it can be to kind of help you navigate through whatever challenges you have in. We want to be that person that you can click on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and get a word from God from us. So again, we just want to welcome you to our first podcast, and so I'm going to get right into it. Again, this is our first guest. This is Pastor Gene Howard, and so we're going to talk to him about his purpose, how he found his purpose, and how he came up with purpose-driven church. So I'm going to give you the floor, and we'll just kind of converse and talk.
What's up, Natalia? How you doing?
I'm doing good.
All right. It's good to be here with my cousin. Right. Congratulations on your first episode for your podcast. I'm so excited. I'm so proud of you. That you're doing this. Right. It takes a lot of guts. Right. But I've watched you accomplish every goal that you set out to go after, and I'm super proud of you. So I'm so glad to be here. And then what better opportunity for me to share about them purpose, right?
Thank you.
That I feel like is my God given calling is to help people find their purpose, right? And I know we'll talk about it through this podcast, but it really took me a long time to really be confident enough to walk in this purpose, right? And
Yeah.
so I know we're going to get into it, but like I said, I'm just glad to be here. So thank you.
Okay, so I know that when I first thought of a guest to come on the show, you were my first pick, and it's because I watched you grow up as a little boy. Because I grew up with you, we were very very close. You were more like
Right,
my brother than my cousin,
right, right.
and I just remember even as a child, you had a gift like you want to fall out, you wanted us to be your choir or whatever it is. So you always was preaching from a little boy, and so I'm so proud of you as well as you say you're proud of me to be living out your purpose that God has for you in this purpose driven church. But what I wanted to know was like what was your pivotal point where you knew like okay, now was the time to do this. Now is the time to open my church to do what God has called me to do. When did you get to that point?
That's a good question and a heavy question. I think that the only way I can really answer that is to kind of start you from the beginning, right? It wouldn't be fair for me just to drop you guys like in the middle of that because starting the church really took years and years of confidence building. It took years and years of me like reshaping my life, right? It took
Mm-hmm.
years of me overcoming childhood traumas and confidence issues, right? And
Yeah.
so I would say it probably started for me when I was about 16 or 17. I remember I bought my first car, and it was a black Honda Civic, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was a four-door stick shift. I remember when I went and bought it. I went to this area in Wilmington. It's called Monkey Junction, right? And I went to Monkey Junction and bought the car. And some friends of mine followed me back home. They took me out there. They followed me back home, and I taught myself how to drive a stick from Monkey Junction back to the house, which was probably like 10, 15 miles. And I stalled at every stoplight. It was ridiculous, right? But I bought that car, and you know, growing up, we didn't have a vehicle.
Right. Yeah.
You know that, right? You
Yep.
know
Yep.
that. My mom was on disability from the time I was a child. My dad, who I'm very close with now, he wasn't, fully in my life, growing up, and so, my mother was a single mom. She was raising myself, my sisters, and my brother, right? And so, growing up, we didn't have a car, and that's one of the things that really inspired me to really never give up because I watched my mom as someone on disability pay for her house.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like that is a testimony in itself
Mm-hmm.
of the how we God can prepare us and put us in a place where even though we don't have the resources to accomplish certain things,
Mm-hmm.
God will provide, right?
Yep.
So anyway, I bought my first car. It was our only family car. It was really important to me to buy this car, and so I was driving to a party one night. I wasn't supposed to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
So me and my friends, man, we my house is on like a slight hill, and so it was a stick shift. So we put it in neutral. We rolled it down the driveway and rolled it into the street, pushed it around the corner, and started it up. Right, we was tripping, but we was off the chain, man. Like we were not supposed to go out that night. Multiple people told us do not drive that car, right? But
Right.
I didn't listen. They didn't listen. Anyway, we get to the party. I think I probably had a couple of drinks. I can't, fully remember. But long story short, a fight breaks out at the party like they typically did. We're all rushing to leave. A bunch of people hop in my car, and we're driving. And the passenger, who was like one of my best friends, we were arguing over a song, right? I remember it like it was yesterday. We were arguing over "Nuck If You Buck," right? You remember "Nuck If You Buck"?
Yeah, I do.
We
I do.
knucking and bucking. You remember that?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to play "Nuck If You Buck," right? Because I was feeling hype, and he wanted to play LL Cool J "I Need Love," right? So we're going back and forth in the car, So I'm going to "Nuck If You Buck," and then he flipping back to LL Cool J "I Need Love." We're going back and forth, and we like in the front seat arguing. No, no. And the next thing I know, I was waking up in the ambulance, looking up at the lights. And if you ever been in the back of an ambulance at night, the lights in the ambulance are so bright. It's like I looked up and I just remember saying, like, am I dead? Like, am I in heaven? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on? And I remember the lady who was working with me at the time. She said, you're not dead, but I don't know how, right? And
Wow.
so
Wow.
from that moment, Nelly, I started to realize like God had something greater for me in my life, right? And I've never really told that story in this setting, right? But myself and my friends who were in their car that night, none of us died. We had some bumps and bruises, right? But God covered us and He kept us, right?
Yeah.
And so that is really was our first lesson in understanding that we didn't die that night because God had a greater purpose for our life.
That's awesome. What an awesome story. So, I know you told your story, but now that you are the pastor
Yeah,
of Purpose Driven Church, how are you going to help those who don't know their purpose find their purpose in
yeah.
life, or just even when they come to the church, find out what their purpose is, even once they cross over that threshold?
So I'm dropping a ebook soon, right? It's called Five Steps to Find Your Purpose. You guys definitely go on my Instagram at Purpose Driven Pastor. We're definitely gonna post it on there. We'll be dropping it soon. But in our ebook, one of the things I share is that purpose is not a destination; it's a journey, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so for a long time, I thought that purpose was a point in my life that I had accomplished something, right? Like people think like, oh, my purpose is to do X, right? And that may be true, like that may be your purpose, but your purpose is really a journey. A
Yeah.
part of my purpose was getting into that car accident. I didn't tell y'all, but in that car accident, that car flipped at least 7 times. The reason I know that is because the people that were driving behind us,
Yeah.
they said that when they started counting, the car was already rolling, and they counted seven, so it was at least 7 times, right? So that happening in my life, which was one of the lowest points I've ever been in my life. I put my life in jeopardy. I put my friend's life in jeopardy. That was really like a very low point for me, but that was a part of my journey, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I've watched how God has used that to shape me, to shape the decisions that I've made since then, right? He's used that to shape even the people that I'm around now. He's put me around people who influence me in a way to make good decisions.
Right.
Because really, like you can't ultimately um, walk in your purpose if you're surrounded by the wrong people.
Right.
An environment has a lot to do with you ultimately being successful and you being able to walk into your purpose. But at Purpose Driven Church, we really talk explicitly about life and about those things that we've experienced that bring us to this point.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
like we were talking about our traumas, right?
Right.
Like
Mm-hmm.
we all have trauma from childhood or from past relationships, or a part of my trauma was that car accident. Like I still haven't fully, like I'm still working through that, right? Like I don't think that I've really seen those friends face to face as an adult and really looked them in the eyes and been like, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I put all of our lives in jeopardy that night. And thanks be to God, like he covered us. But what would have happened if he didn't? Like, I'm still dealing with that. But I talk to people about dealing with that trauma, you know. And so that's an important piece of your journey.
Yeah, I know a lot of people can't deal with trauma, especially childhood trauma, especially coming from family. You know, back in the day, even with our family, it was first on the rug. If something happened, we didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
They didn't talk about it. But we, like me, you, and our other cousins, have came to a decision to not let that go on in our next generations. And
Right.
so I think it's very, very important that we also be aware of the things that are affecting us or have affected us in our child that are affecting us now in our adulthood. And that's a big issue when it comes to how you live today, when it comes to who you choose to be in a relationship with, who you choose to associate with, like you said, friends. We could have those friends as a child, but or even in our teenage years or early 20s, but at 40, I'm 40, you're in your almost late mid 30s, you know, we can't always carry those friends on to that next journey. And so I have found it hard to let those friends go, the ones that I know that can't go because I love them. I have love for them from a certain part of my life, whether it's childhood, my teen years, or early 20s. But it's a struggle because you worry about what they're going to think, how they're going to feel when you let them go. That's a struggle mentally. And so it's a struggle between the world and then, of course, you turning your life over to God and trying to do the right thing, but still have those feelings with those friends or family that you want to still hold on to. Like,
Yep.
how do you let that go? Like, how do you tell people, or how do you explain to your congregation or your friends or whatever the case may be to let those people go to do the purpose that God has called you to do? Because I know I find it hard now,
Yeah.
even in my right now.
Yeah, so you got to remember, purpose is a journey, right? So a lot of the relationships that we developed, like later in life and in our adulthood, are representations of our childhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we seek out different people and different qualities based on our need, right? So if you're somebody that needs attention because you didn't get it as a child, sometimes we look for people who um, they give us a lot of attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that person could end up being like what do you call it? Submersive or like overwhelming for us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Uh, that person can be like too much, and so we get in relationships, and at first it's like I love this thing about this person, right? Because they're meeting my need, but over time, sometimes if that need is something that's negative in our life, then now we don't want to interact with that person anymore because we recognize that what they're providing for us is a part of our trauma, right?
Yeah.
It's feeding an area in our life that is unhealed and needs to be healed. And once that area in our life is healed, we don't need them anymore.
So we like outgrow them basically.
We outgrow them, but the issue is not like us outgrowing them. The issue is that we selected them on the front end, right? Like, why did we select this person as a spouse or as a friend or as a business partner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you look in the Bible, there was a place in the New Testament where Jesus was preaching in a house, and this man was a cripple, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they couldn't get inside the house. So his friends lowered him down in the roof, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I preach a message from that called We Need Better Friends, right? We need the type of friends that are going to get us to Jesus and they're focused on getting us healed,
Yeah.
right? We don't need people who continually allow us to stew in bad parts of our life, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Who continue to feed the negative parts of our life. So it's important that, like, as we're growing, we're considering why we're selecting friendships, why we're selecting relationships, right? Like, what is it about our personality that chose that person,
Right.
right? But and I'm talking about myself. Like, we have to take accountability and recognize, like, you chose that person because something was broken in you,
Mhm.
and they met a need that you had. And especially when we're talking about marriage, we got to understand that marriage is supposed to be forever, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's supposed to be till death do us part.
It
I mean, we
is.
both been
Yeah.
through a
Yeah.
marriage, right? So
We
I
yeah.
mean, listen, we're not here to, like, bash nobody. The
Right.
truth is, you do outgrow some people in life,
Yeah.
right? But that's why we have to do our due diligence when we're building relationships, whether it's business partners, right? Friendships. We got a new term now, situationships,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
we just get caught up with somebody.
But that's the term of the world. That's not.
It
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
it
And so
is,
we
but
can't get caught up in the worldly things, and it's hard. And I know you talked about Sunday. You talked about the sift.
yeah,
Um, how you sift through things, and so a part of that comes to me about um past friends or past relationships. They can remember you of who you used to be. They
yeah,
don't respect you of who you're becoming.
yeah,
And so that's a mental strain for me. You know what I'm saying? Like, if everybody have their own challenges, and that's a challenge for me because we all don't have a squeaky clean past. We all
yeah,
have those areas of that we don't like. That we was this person, we was that person. But when you're trying to change your life, to turn your life over to God and try to do the right thing, that is when you get crucified the most. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
I know what's going to happen because I
right,
mean that's just a part of the journey.
right,
I don't like it. It definitely messes with my mental because you'd be like, well, dang, when I was this way, I was okay. Now I'm
right,
going this way, it's a problem, and it's like you in between, like a seesaw. You're just up and
yeah,
down in your walk with Christ. And I know it's not gonna be an easy walk. I know
right,
it don't supposed to be easy. The challenges are going to come. They will come. And we will overcome them. But that is one of my biggest challenges because of where I came from
yeah,
and then where God has me now. And I know He got so much more for me in the kingdom of God, just not that I don't even know about. Like, I'm not a speaker by any means necessary. This is something new for me, even talking on a podcast, even creating a podcast. This is something new for me. So the fact that I'm doing this, I already know is God that has me doing it. And so I don't know the journey that He had for me, but what does bother me sometimes, I'm not gonna say all the time, but it is what the ones that I love and care about think of me, because I do love and I care about what they think,
yeah,
and so that bothers me the most. So how do you how do you get over that? Because I know you too, and you know me, but how you can look at me of who you see me now, some people can't look at me that way, and
yeah,
so how do you kind of navigate through that?
yeah. Good, real good question, right? So, um, sometimes two issues arise. The biggest of the two issues is us holding ourselves hostage, right? Hostage to our past, hostage to our mistakes. Like, there are things that you have done that I have done that nobody else knows about, right?
Right.
Like, it's just us and God. And sometimes we hold ourselves hostage to things that where we messed up, bad decisions we made. So the first thing you have to do is forgive yourself. Now, internal forgiveness is hard, right? And that's another thing that you have to heal from. You have to
Yeah.
heal from yourself.
Yeah.
Like, before you start having a conversation about how they look at you, look in the mirror and consider how you see yourself, right? That's something that I've had to do. For a long time, you asked me how I started the church. For a long time, I looked in the mirror and I didn't see pastor, right?
Okay.
I didn't even see man of God.
Yeah.
And still, sometimes when I look in the mirror now, I'm like, God, like, are you tripping? Like, why would you even select me, like, to represent you, right? I'm like the last person that you should have considered, like that. we still have those issues, right? We have to be able to see ourselves through the lens of Christ. Like God created
That's
you
good.
to He created you, and He sees you as an end result.
Mm.
Like you see yourself as start and middle.
Yep.
God sees you at the end, and that's why He can accept you where you are. Like He sees, like, listen, I wrote the book of Natalia. Like
Mm-hmm.
I already know, like, listen, Natalia says she doesn't want to speak, but she doesn't even realize at the end she's going to be speaking to large audiences and she's going to be comfortable doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're just going through the process. So in the process, the way you get past people's opinions is first get past your own. How do you see you? When I wake up in the morning, I started doing something and I stopped and I got to get back to it. And I'm glad I'm even talking about it. But I started doing
Affirmation.
an affirmation,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like affirming every morning what God told me I am, who He said I'm going to be, who I see myself as, right? I wake up and look in the mirror and I affirm it. And you have to say it over. It takes a long time to start believing, right?
Yeah.
But I've heard people say that sometimes people tell a lie so long that they start believing that lie. Well, if you got to lie to yourself and tell yourself, listen, I am no longer a liar, right? I'm no longer a thief. Like, listen, I'm an amazing dad. I'm an amazing mom. Like, if that's what you have to wake up in the mirror and tell yourself every day, that's okay. Tell yourself until you start seeing what you say, right? And day one, you might not see it. But as you start saying what you want to be or what you believe God has called you to be, eventually you're going to start becoming that thing, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
start, my dad, Anthony Jameson, he wrote a book called Your Mouth is Bigger Than Your Mountain, right?
Yeah.
And in the book, he talks about how the things that we say have a big effect on what we become. I'm Pastor Gene Howard. Follow me on Instagram at Purpose Driven Pastor. I'm dropping an ebook soon, 5 Steps to Find Your Purpose. Be sure to follow me so you can get access to this great ebook dropping soon.
So you spoke about affirmations. Like, tell me how you will handle you knowing who you are. Like, I know who I am. I know who I'm called to be. I know who God has called me to be. I'm very
Uh-huh.
confident in that. I'm very happy with who I am as a person. But what do you do? How do you? How can you give me feedback about people not understanding who God has called me to be because of who I used to be?
Right. So we talked about you holding yourself hostage, right?
Hmm.
And now we can focus a little bit more on, all right, so now you have the confidence, right? You know who you are. But as I'm walking or trying to walk in my purpose, those people who knew me when hold me hostage to who I used to be, right? Um, so the Bible puts it like this, and then I'm gonna put it in layman's terms. The Bible says the prophet only is without honor in his own home, right? It's like people who knew you when. Oh, I knew who you used to be, so I can't allow you to grow. Anytime you're in an environment that you can't grow, you need to get out of that environment, right?
Right.
So you just answer your own question, really. Like if you are in an environment that is made up of people who are not allowing you to flourish as who you're trying to be now, then they don't get to be in your space anymore, right? And so a hard part of adulthood is stepping away from relationships that are not propelling you into your purpose. That's a big factor in your life.
Hmm.
And I think that we can identify relationships that are harming us when it's something that stands out, like people who cause you to spend too much money, right? Or people who talk down to you or something, right? But we don't really identify people who hold us back from moving forward into who we're supposed to be, right? Like it could be a sister, a brother, a cousin, like it could be anybody,
Yeah.
anyone who says, well, hey, how can God use you? Like, no, you don't get to determine how God can use me.
Right.
When God created me, He created me with a purpose. Like before you came into my life, I was here with purpose. I had this purpose before I knew you. And so I think, um, depending on the relationship, is worth having a conversation, right?
Yeah.
Because typically when people when people interact with us, especially in a negative way, it has more to do with them and less to do with you.
Definitely,
And
definitely.
that's something that I really had to learn. Like when people lash out at you or when they say certain things to you, it's a reflection of them internally, and it has less
Mm-hmm.
to do with you and more to do with how they see themselves. They're they may be intimidated by your anointing,
True,
right?
true.
They could be intimidated by your potential.
Yeah,
And that's a very scary thing when you have people in your inner circle who are
yep,
intimidated by you,
yeah.
right? Like, listen, Judas, you got to get up out, you got to get out the mix. And Jesus was good at it because Jesus identified Judas in front of everybody, right?
Yeah,
And it's important that like you one let people know where they stand in your life, right? Like if someone's a real friend and they're holding you hostage to who you used to be, they might not even realize they're doing it. So another thing you have to do is communicate. And me, like I had an issue. Like one of my biggest problems was looking someone dead in the face and saying, "We have an issue here. We need to get it resolved." Right. My thing was, I was big on just ghosting. Right. Like, listen, we not
yeah.
gelling. I ain't talking to you no more. I'm gonna put you on the block list.
That's
Right.
me.
And you out of my life. And sometimes you still need to just, X people out of your life. Like in the restaurant industry, we used to say 86 them, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we used to 86 a meal because we ran out of it. There are some people who have ran their course in your life and you need to 86 them. And, I guess through your process of developing and getting therapy, because that's an important piece, right? As you
Mm-hmm.
get therapy and as you talk through your issues and your concerns, it will help you identify those people who are need to be in your life now and those people who you have kind of outgrown.
And that's the good thing about this podcast, and that's why I'm talking about mental health and how it definitely coincides with spirituality. Because when you are developing your walk with God, people don't talk about the mental part that it causes.
No, never.
They don't talk about it. They just say, "Oh, well, go to church and pray about it."
Right.
But how does that look? How does that look to just say, "I'm gonna go to church, I'm gonna pray about it"? But what about when I go at home and I'm laying in the bed at night and then I'm having these negative thoughts and my mental ain't
Yeah.
thinking what I need to think.
Yeah.
And then when I'm praying, I feel like it ain't hitting the ears of God.
Right.
So what am I supposed to do? Like just wallow in my own mess or just drown because I was told to go pray about it and go to
Right.
church.
Yeah.
And people talk about therapy as if it's a bad thing, and it's not. It's definitely shined down upon in our, the African American culture. But you never know how God is going to use you for that person who is just not going to go through the doors of the church. I
Right.
know people who come into my office or into my life that I have to counsel. I can't just say, well, let's go to church and just pray about it. I can't
Right.
say that because
Right.
there are steps to get to that point.
It is.
But you
Yeah.
don't know how God is going to use you, and I know God is using me for that purpose. Like it's somebody who's laying in the hospital bed right now on the mental ward.
Right.
When they get released from the mental ward, you're not gonna say, okay, now that you're released, your treatment plan is to go to church and go talk to the pastor.
Right.
No, it's steps to that. You're gonna definitely get discharged. You're gonna have a treatment plan. You're gonna go to maybe a recovery home, and then you're gonna get connected to a therapist.
Yeah. And
I
purpose has to span. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut
Yeah,
you off.
you good.
Um, purpose has to span beyond the four walls of the church, right?
Right.
And so in the church that you and I grew up in, I look back on like different people who were in the church, and like looking back on it, like some of them were dealing with mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
I remember there was a lady who used to be in our church growing up, and I won't say her name, but because people might know her,
I
right?
know.
And she could be dead and gone. God rest her soul. Like, but she, like, while the preacher was preaching, she would stand up in the church or she would yell. And I remember her saying, "Get me first, Jesus, get me first." And we still clown about that to this
So
day.
they definitely know who you're talking about
And
when you say
I
that,
know,
right?
right?
You definitely told it about
Listen, don't drop her in the comments. Don't do her like that. But, like looking back on that interaction as a kid, like that lady was suffering from mental health,
Yeah.
right? And I think that, one of the best things about having you at Purpose Driven is that we have someone who can identify mental health cases, right?
Mhm.
Because it's been taboo in our churches where, you know, we call, first off, we call everything the anointing, right?
Yes.
And it's not the anointing. Like sometimes when people are speaking in tongues, they're just saying babble,
Yeah.
right? They're
Yeah.
not speaking in tongues. They're just babbling. They're having a mental health episode, but we're not able to identify it because sometimes we just too caught up in the spirit, right?
Mhm.
And so I believe that as a pastor and having a church, we have to meet all of your needs, right?
Yeah.
Your spiritual needs, your emotional needs, and your mental health needs. And you know, as I'm learning and as I'm growing, I'm recognizing that, you know, many of us really suffer from mental health issues, right?
Definitely.
and
Definitely.
and I'm sure you see it in your line of work every day. Like
Every
I'm
day.
talking normal people who go to work every day, 9 to 5, who are having a mental health crisis, and nobody has identified it
Mm-mm.
because they wake up every day, they go to work, they have a family, and because they seem normal, right? We don't identify them,
Yeah. And
you know,
nobody really
as that.
pays close attention if they don't know, because you can have a normal life. You can wake up and go to work every morning, go home, cook dinner for your family,
Yeah,
and go to sleep.
yeah,
When it comes to routine, you might not realize that somebody is really battling something mentally inside their mind. And so that's where people like me come in. I can't speak for every counselor, but I know the purpose that God have on my life to do to the people who have mental health diagnosis, who have substance abuse diagnosis.
yeah,
I am going to bring them to God. You know, I know that's the calling that He has on my life. I'm not a pastor, I'm not a bishop, never going to be, but it's just a different calling that He has in my life in this particular field. And I'm so excited that He has me here doing what I'm doing because, again, therapy can be looked down upon, but He's going to use people like me to bring those people to the forefront of God, to the church doors, because they're not going to just get it, leave it out of
yeah.
a mental ward.
And you said something that I want to touch on. You said, you know, I'll never be a pastor, I'll never be a bishop, right? The work that goes on outside of the church is far more important than the work that goes on inside the church.
That's good.
When Jesus left, he didn't tell them to go to church. He said, go into all of the world, right?
Mm,
And make disciples.
that's
And
good.
so it's important that we recognize like we're supposed to come into church and get built up and get
Mm,
prepared to go out and meet the needs of the people, right? And so
that's good.
if we're focused on what's happening in the church, there are a lot of people, I want to make sure I make this very clear, right? There are a lot of people who are pastors, bishops, missionaries, evangelists that are struggling with their own mental health. And we cannot put a band aid on it and just say, I'm going to lay hands on that person and they're going to be fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I've learned myself, I go to therapy now. You have to be seeing someone and be talking to someone and be talking through your issues and getting a perspective, and hopefully it's a professional perspective.
Yep.
But having somebody to talk to is paramount in anything. Like, especially if you're in leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're in leadership, if you're a boss, not just leadership in the church, like if you lead a team at work,
Yes.
you need to be mentally strong because you're interacting with people who have their own challenges and they have their own issues. And if you're not healthy, you're not going to be able to readily identify the needs of those people. And, you know, one thing that I say, and I'll stop with this, one thing that I say to people that I manage is the you outside of this office is more important to me than the you that I see every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the dad, the mom, the brother, the sister, like,
Yeah.
you know, that person is, I want to know that person, right? I want to understand that person. I want to help that person. And so what you're doing at Wesley is like very, very important, not only in the secular world, but it's important in the kingdom of God. Like
Yeah.
we need more of you in churches.
Right.
Like I
Right.
think every church should have like an on-call therapist.
Yeah.
The pastor needs a therapist. The pastor wife need a therapist, right? The pastor's kids need a therapist. You know, the deacons they need that. Like we all need help and need to be talking to someone so that we can be healthy individuals
Yep.
in our daily lives.
Yep. And I believe, and I'm gonna end on this. I do believe that, in the church, when you're under a good leadership, under a good counsel, because you learn from the head person, which is maybe your pastor or your bishop, you learning from them. So anything you speak is going to be speaking just like them. So having that person in the church will definitely be beneficial for any congregation when it goes to mental health,
Yeah.
substance abuse, domestic violence, anything that can determine how your mental is going to react on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
As long as you have that foundation of a good head, everybody's going to speak like you. So it don't even matter if they're talking to the pastor, because he can't get talked to every day.
Right.
I mean, he would love to, but he definitely has his own challenges when it comes
Yeah.
to other things
I
that he
got
has to
3
do.
kids and a wife. I
Yeah,
cannot talk to
right.
you
So
all day, every
he
day.
have those people put in place,
Yeah.
like myself or an evangelist, deacon, elder, to be able to speak just like him and know that the word's going to still come out the same. And so that's what I learned at where I worship at now as well. So I really appreciate what you just said. That was a really good information.
Yeah, and so as we're growing and as we're learning more about mental health, this is really new for the church, right? Like
Yep.
us even talking about mental health, talking about therapy, like this is a new conversation, especially coming from where we come from, right?
Right.
Like we should just call people crazy and go about our business.
Exactly. Send
And
them to a ward. They be
yeah,
there for 30 days. They come back and do the same thing they did
man,
before they
listen,
left, because there was no treatment. There was
yeah,
no cure.
yeah.
Yeah.
And identifying it, it creates healthy families, right?
Hmm.
It creates healthy communities. It creates healthy people, and that's I believe that God wants us to be healthy, right? And
He
not
does.
only physically, but healthy in our mind. The
Hmm.
Bible tells us that God has not given us the spirit of fear, right? But He's given us power, love, and
And a
a
sound
sound mind,
mind.
right?
Yep.
And when your mind is sound, right? It's funny. The mind might seem like it's something loud, but a
Hmm.
sound mind is a mind that's calm,
That's
right?
calm.
It's a quiet mind. It's a mind. Think of the sound at the beach,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
It's just a calm flow, and so it's important that we try to get to that place in God, right?
Yeah.
A place of peace that passes all understanding. And the only way we can get there is not only going to church and lifting our hands and worshiping, but we need to do real work sometimes, right?
Yeah.
We need to leave out of church and go talk to somebody. We need to go see somebody. We can't keep coming to church week after week, right? Being in these services, hearing a great message, and not doing the internal work that we need to
Hmm.
do to be a better person, because a part of your journey to your purpose, right, is having a sound mind.
I want to thank you for coming on. She Nailed It. You are our first guest. I really appreciate it. You have given some valuable information about how you found your purpose, how somebody else can find their purpose, and then also intertwining it with mental health. I look forward to your church growing, being prosperous. Of course, I'm going to be there every step of the way. I want to thank you again for coming on and being our guest of honor.
You're welcome, cousin. And like I said, I'm very proud of you. Shout out to She Nailed It. You guys go on YouTube, subscribe, like, and share this with family. Share it with friends. I really believe that this podcast is going to bless a lot of people,
It
and
is.
so we're praying for you. And I know that you're going to do something great in the world. So shout out to you, cousin. I love you.
Thank you. Love you too. You guys, please go again on YouTube and Instagram, like, share, and subscribe to our podcast. Our next episode will be November 7th with Mike Lee. I look forward to you guys being a part of it. Thank you.